Welcome to Talking Agility, a podcast from Accenture. Your host is Elitsa Nacheva.
Welcome to Talking Agility, a new podcast by Accenture looking to explore the topic of enterprise agility. I'm your host, Elitsa Nacheva, and today I'm joined by Andy Young, who was also my guest during our kickoff episode for the podcast. Andy is a managing director in Accenture's financial services business in London. He leads our talent and organization practice in the UK and Ireland, and also leads our agile organization practice globally. Andy, thank you very much for joining me again and taking the time to speak about rewiring the business for enterprise agility.
Thanks, Ellie. Good to be here again.
Today's topic is rewiring your business for agility. Andy, could you unpack it a little bit for our listeners?
So what this is really about is obviously applying agile change to specific change initiatives, specific programs, specific product areas within technology is beneficial. But we believe the fundamental benefits of agility, both at a strategic and financial level, you can only really get to those when you rewire the whole business over time towards agility. Those organizations that are wired for constant change, that ability to respond and adapt quickly to both the opportunities in the marketplace, but also the massive disruption that's going on. Those organizations are the ones that are going to survive and thrive, in the new world we're in. And we very much think about those like living businesses. They're designed to adapt, designed to evolve over time. They're much more like living organisms rather than bureaucracies.
What are the things that a business needs to rewire actually?
Well, we talked about previously about leadership and culture being the real foundation of an agile organization. I'd add to that very much a level of thought around how the organization manages constant change. Rethinking risk and governance within the organization, how decisions about risk are made, and funding and investment alongside that being the other big topic. Then we get into the actual organization itself, rewiring the organization structure, rethinking the workforce, and then really getting into the thinking about the customer proposition, the channels, the operations that serve customers end to end. And you can't have this conversation now in financial services without talking about technology and data as well. And so we talk about rewiring the business, we mean pretty much every aspect of the business.
Every aspect of the business. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the leadership and culture ones?
Sure. So perhaps just to give an example to start with, we're working with a large financial services institution in Asia, and one of their challenges was really around how as a leadership team do we start to role model these agile ways of working into our organization, and not just into a simple single country culture, but into many different national cultures and legacy business cultures across Asia. So we worked with them to help inculcate those behaviours into their leadership teams, both their executive team, but also the different leadership teams around the business, but also help them run experiments, pilots, and then help them scale in many different markets. And that wasn't done as a sort of central program of work. It's so much done as a grassroots movement within the business. That story could be at many different financial institutions. A lot of them are looking at both leadership and culture aspects. To start with, we think that's a really productive place to start this conversation. And there's some really key behavioural themes, there. And these are not going to be universally true. What we're not here to do is give a kind of a rote answer, a rote prescription about culture. This is very much something for individual organisations to work through. There are a few things that tend to bubble to the top, and they're reflective of where all this started in Toyota in 1948, or in the Sea Lodge when they were bringing up the Agile Manifesto. These things rang true then, and they ring true now for many organisations. But I do think it is a individual organisation choice.
So changing culture is a unique journey for each business. But are there any common themes that come up time and time again?
And some of those things would be customer focus. So how are the things we're doing relevant to our customers and clients? And obviously that's something that's a struggle for many financial services organizations, where other products in other industries seem more relevant to our lives now as consumers than financial services products do. And obviously there are some new entrants who are trying to change that. A way to get around that is actually participation with with customers. In another sector, one of the big home retailers that we work with, they conducted thousands of home visits to customers to understand how they improved their homes, how they did home projects before embarking on their strategy and their new way of working in agile. Collaboration is massively important. Secondly, collaboration is something you hear a lot about. Agile, you hear about in multidisciplinary teams. Maybe less talked about is the collaboration across silos within an organisation. That's particularly true in financial services or outside the organisation to the ecosystem. That's something that really starts to challenge the notion about what a financial services enterprise looks like. So are we able to collaborate effectively? Can we connect people up? But then can they co-work on stuff? Can they co-create stuff together across the organisation? I think transparency is the third one worth highlighting. So can we share information? Can we share success and failure? That needs real trust in the organisation. It needs leadership examples of that. I think that's one that, given the nature of the industry, a lot of the data that we're dealing with in financial services, we struggle with that. There's a nervousness now around client data protection as well. So there's definitely some competing factors around that need for transparency, but what's acceptable, what's not. That's something for each organisation to navigate. Learning, again, something that, let's say, maybe has been misused as a cultural attribute in financial services. In many places, that's been pushed back into being training, often compliance training only, but really embracing a growth mindset about actually we're going to try something. If it fails, we'll learn from it. We'll move on. If it's something that's successful, we'll learn from it. We'll move on. And that's combined with the reskilling need within the industry. And we've got some great examples, particularly from some of the European banks, about embracing the reskilling agenda and connecting that up to being a digital bank.
And what other behaviors are important? Innovation and freedom come up a lot, I would assume.
Innovation, clearly a very hot topic. You've got innovation directors everywhere, innovation labs everywhere. Nothing wrong with those. Clearly, there may be a few of those people listening. But innovation as a behaviour is something that everyone should embrace. That spirit of experimentation, of creativity is really important. The challenge for us as an industry is how do we scale that up across the organisation when actually we've asked people not to be creative, not to take measured risks. And then finally, empowerment. And that's probably the bit where a lot of this stands or falls on empowerment and trust. So are we prepared to trust people? Are we prepared to give them space to perform? We give them space to lead? Are we allowed to make quick decisions? I think about a number of the institutions we've worked with have particularly had to work through the challenges of empowering that product owner type level in the organisation. That's that kind of specialist middle management ranks that needs to step up in this change. And that's been something where, I think about one of my clients at the moment where we've had to spend a lot of time helping them through that journey of product owner education, product owner development as well.
And it's something that I also noticed in my client context where someone is given the title of product owner, but it seems like more of the focus falls on taking the different roles and responsibilities which come with the product owner title, but not really embracing the fact that the empowerment is in their hands and they need to be the mediator between the business and representing the customer interests and feels. These are very, very important, Andy, and I really resonate with them, having seen them from my experience and works with clients on the ground, particularly with regards to collaboration. It's one of my favorite topics, and I was very lucky enough to do work with the top 200 group of one of our clients when it came to talking about collaboration, and it was interesting how the perception that they had about collaboration was very different than the perception I had. So I quickly realized we had to bridge that gap. But also I saw that there was the worry about transparency, to what extent they could be transparent. They worried that everything had to be very much meticulously checked, and they couldn't feel themselves empowered to be sharing with their teams. So these are some very important principles.
This is Talking Agility. Send us your feedback at accenture.com/Talking Agility.
Andy, would you mind also telling me a little bit about risk and governance and funding and investment?
Yeah, so topics that some of our clients, actually many of our clients, obsess around, and quite rightly so. A lot of the industry has been founded on obviously managing money, managing risk, and so quite rightly, some of the questions we get with senior leadership teams are, won't pursuing an agile organisation raise a risk profile of my organisation? How will I make decisions within that? How will I know what to fund, and how will I maintain control of spend? So all natural concerns. Our perspective would be that a truly agile approach towards this topic actually increases both pace, but also stability and control. Is that done in the right way? What you're doing is maybe not controlling so much from the centre, maybe not trying to impose yourself on every single decision, but you are raising the level of actual control you have when you're operating within an uncertain environment. Think about kind of risk and governance to start with. So clearly there's some aspect of agility which is about leadership being able to sense and respond to risks and threats in the environment, but also that sensing to happen at the edges of the business as well. I think a helpful example would be that Asian financial services example that I gave. Their ability as a leadership team to see everything that's going on in every single market across Asia is substantially less than the individuals actually working in those markets, knowing what's going on the ground, knowing what competitors are doing, knowing what the consumer needs. Being able to sense and respond both at a senior leadership level, but also at the front line of a business. Being able to make rapid decisions within sensible parameters at different levels of the organisation is really important. And those decisions increasingly need to be data-driven. A lot of organisations struggle, even though they're financial services institutions, they struggle with a paucity of data or good data to make decisions. That shouldn't take away the human judgment, the leadership act in making a decision, but understanding the data around the data sets available around decisions is really important. And we're starting to see this movement towards intelligent organisations where data starts to be much more available, not just in the centre, around the boardroom, but out the front line too. On investment, this is really important funding investment because obviously, there's no greater way to signal what your priorities are than where you spend your dollars or your euros or whatever currency you're working in. And we generally see a need as we move towards agile that there needs to be much more flexible and dynamic funding cycle, that there's space to be able to invest in new change that's coming through. Mm-hmm. Organisations may need to embrace things like tranche funding and seed funding, not just annual funding cycles for programs. And there's a whole load of research we've done on what's called the wise pivots, which just to sort of demystify that slightly is the choices that you make between investing in transforming the core business today, growing that core business, or building the future business. Mm-hmm. And actually getting back to making deliberate choices about where we're going to place our bets really is critical. We see our change leaders in financial services doing much more of that than everybody else. So they place much more careful bets on select things rather than spreading the money around everywhere.
Yeah. And I think when I was first faced with understanding what a tranche approach was when it came to working for a client who was embracing this particular approach, the way that I saw it is instead of giving X amount to one particular program, you would give some of that amount to see how this program would do. And when they do their first release, then you're going to make the call, is this program actually worth continuing, or would you be better off repurposing those 3/4 of the remaining funding into something else that will benefit the future organization?
That's right. Or if it's really successful, you double down on that bet.
How about rewiring the organization and the workforce?
Our view is it's not particularly about organization structure. There are obviously a lot of kind of alternative models out there. We do a lot of work on organization structure and organization development with clients. But it wouldn't be the sole place that we start in terms of trying to create agility. We think there's much more about the way the organisation works, the way the business works, the way it serves customers. But that said, focusing on smaller, more multidisciplinary teams, understanding how those teams integrate together, understanding how we create a more flexible organisation structure, so something that's modular, that can be built and rebuilt a bit more like Lego rather than bricks and cement. And then really understanding how the vision and the purpose for the organisation is reflected actually inside the organisation. There's a number of very, very cutting edge projects we've got, particularly in the resources sector and in the product sector, and in some of our retail clients that where they're really experimenting at the extreme end of this. Now, I think on this topic, financial services will always be a follower because we've obviously got certain aspects of regulation in different jurisdictions that point towards more traditional organisation structures. But even with that, we can start to look at more flexible organisational constructs and frankly build collaborative and more agile working practices even within the existing organisation structure. So if that's the organisation, if we think about the workforce now, there's two aspects to this. One is the reskilling or the new skilling journey that organisations are starting to go on with their workforces. We know from data sets across industry and particularly financial services, there's a very high appetite to reskill or new skill from the workforce. But actually the organisational response to that's been relatively low. Only 3% of financial service institutions are increasing their learning investments as a result. But there's some leaders out there in the market. AT&T are a great example in the communication sector, where they've been helping their engineers co-invest in their new skilling and moving from being traditional communications engineers into being technologists in a new technology company, as AT&T is moving towards. Or our own journey, we've reskilled at Accenture around 165,000 technologists over the last couple of years in new IT. So these big shifts in workforce are essential, and we're talking about agility, the ability to move one of the key resources an organisation has towards the skills that are relevant for the new way of working, the new service to the client, whatever it happens to be.
And Andy, what about the workforce?
The other aspect of the workforce is actually the workforce itself becoming more adaptive. Increasingly, we've got organisations who are interested in tapping into skills and capability outside their formal organisation, whether that's freelancers or service providers, or using task sourcing platforms like Upwork or Work Marketplace to bring skills into the organisation on a sort of as demanded basis. Those things aren't prevalent in financial services at this stage. They're things that are used in pockets of the organisation. For example, marketing typically uses more of those than other departments. But we've seen other sectors move very, very rapidly towards that kind of adaptive and extended workforce concept, particularly in the United States. And I think we'll see that continuing around the world as a trend.
That is very interesting, Andy. The last two of the key elements are channels and operations, and also technology and data. Could you tell us a little bit more about these two key factors?
This is the core of the business. Like, how as financial services do we serve our customers, our clients? And we're certainly seeing from all customers, whether they're B2B or B2C, this desire for a more coherent digital interaction, but also something that works from a human perspective. Sometimes that might be kind of physical co-location, the interaction that you might get in a branch or in a relationship manager context. Yeah. But equally, it might be something that's enabled by digital as well. Within that, the kind of empathy and relevance to the customer we talked about as a behaviour, that really coming through in the proposition, the channel, in the operation, something that works for me as a customer, something that's, we've talked a lot about frictionless, something that just works. Yeah. But also when it needs to be human, it's human and it's responsive. So it's not just a stick experience that can only work within certain parameters. When I have something that I really need help with, I can seek help with that. Lots of kind of interesting examples out there of organisations embracing this in some quite traditional environments. I think it's quite a few years old now, but I really like the example of the State Bank of India and their kind of in touch branches, which were this kind of significant digitization of the branch environment in what's one of the biggest retail banks in the world, in a very, very kind of traditional kind of Indian market context, but tapping into this new generation of consumers that are coming through in some of the urban centres in India. It was a great story.
And what about technology and data?
And technology and data is behind a lot of that. So understanding actually how, you've got these very, very new startups. So, Monzo or Atom or Starling in the UK as examples. And there's the similar lists around the world for each country. Those organizations have been able to build very focused architecture and very kind of, very kind of clean build in terms of they're not dealing with any legacy. Yeah. So actually they can naturally, they're born digital, they're born agile. Their job is easier. Their job is easier. The IT departments, the CIOs of our large clients, they need to grapple with things moving at different speeds in their architecture, and actually a lot of it not moving fast enough. Yeah. So they're very much focused on how they embrace DevOps, how do they create multi-speed architectures to separate slower bits from bits that need to move faster. Yeah. How do they start to embrace data to make fast decisions within the business, and that's a really big topic. It's something that we'll get into in subsequent podcasts, but we can't talk about this whole topic about speeding up and rewiring organizations without talking about technology and data.
Of
You just
course.
need to look at a Netflix or an Amazon or a Google to see the way the world's going, and financial services will be no exception to that.
Having reviewed those 9 key elements, what would you say are some specific aspects for banking insurance which they need to consider to become more agile?
So I think beyond the comment about making sure you start with thinking about the whole journey and not just addressing one element like organization or technology, would be 2 areas where people get hung up. Thinking about the whole of that, all of those 9 areas. The other thing is just recognizing that within your organization, it needs to be right for your organization. It needs to be right for what you're trying to do strategically and for your customers and clients. And then recognizing not all aspects of the organization need to run at the same speed.
Thank you very much to Andy for joining me for yet another very insightful conversation. I hope this was as useful and interesting to our listeners as I found it myself. You can expect our next episode in the next 2 weeks. In the meantime, I would encourage to visit our website accenture.com/talkingagility, where you can read Andy's blog and also download the report on the enterprise agility topic. In addition, you can also subscribe via iTunes or SoundCloud, review us and rate us, and send us any questions, comments, suggestions. I would love to hear any feedback on topics that you'd like to hear more about in the future. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you tune in next time.